How far would you go for love? Is there such a thing as paying too much when it comes to matters of the heart? On a sunny day, Dr. Yanis walks down the hills with a rooster in hand, the payment for his treatment of a patient's ear infection, taking in the breathtaking landscapes of his home village, Camino, on the island of Cephalonia, Greece. He admires the simplicity and tranquility of village life, freed from the chaos and bustle of the city. Dr. Yanis is drawn to the strong sense of community, brotherhood, and the genuine smiles that greet him wherever he goes. The villagers' humble way of life, centered around fishing, farming, and raising livestock, is something he treasures deeply. As he continues his walk, he feels a deep sense of gratitude for the peacefulness and beauty that surrounds him. As the only doctor in the village, he is highly respected and relied upon by the locals for his medical expertise. However, despite his crucial role, his financial situation is far from luxurious. The villagers, who are predominantly farmers and livestock breeders, compensate him for his services by offering what they have in their possession, be it freshly grown produce or healthy livestock. This exchange system not only reflects the communal spirit of the village but also highlights the doctor's selflessness and dedication to his profession. Today, a church procession takes place, and the entire village participates, with men, women, and children walking in line while murmuring prayers. Those who are sick lay down to pray for divine healing. However, Dr. Yanis finds this amusing. He believes that religion is merely an opium for the masses, and the supposed healing they claim to receive is nothing more than a placebo effect. Despite his skepticism, he respects the villagers' beliefs and recognizes the comfort it provides them. The next scene reveals a beautiful young woman with long, dark hair and deep brown eyes running along the wooden bridge towards a young, handsome man in a fishing boat. As soon as he spots her, he jumps out of the boat and embraces her in a big hug, both of them laughing with joy. Without hesitation, they jump together into the cool water below, their bodies splashing and diving beneath the surface. Pelagia is a pretty young woman in her early 20s, the only child of Dr. Yanis. She is deeply in love with Mandras, her childhood sweetheart and friend. The two have a strong connection. Pelagia is fiercely loyal to Mandras, and he is devoted to her in return. Despite the challenges and uncertainties of life on the island of Cephalonia, their love remains a constant source of comfort and joy for both of them. Although her father is aware of her relationship with Mandras, he isn't particularly fond of him. He is currently training her to be a doctor, and he feels that she is way above him. He knows that Mandras may feel threatened by her once she becomes a doctor, while he remains a fisherman. Men always want to be ahead of their wives and not the other way around. At one point, he threatened to marry her off to Mandras without a dowry, which made her sad. Dr. Yanis doesn't often express his emotions, but when he looks at his daughter, he is filled with immense pride. Her olive-colored skin and striking features are reminiscent of her late mother, whom Dr. Yanis still mourns deeply. He feels a sense of sadness that his wife isn't here to witness the beauty of the daughter they created together. He knows that his daughter's determination to become a doctor is motivated by her desire to find a cure for tuberculosis, the disease that took her mother's life. Dr. Yanis is in awe of his daughter's strength and resilience, despite the loss they both experienced. As a father, Dr. Yanis is happy to support his daughter's aspirations and provide her with the resources she needs to succeed. He has faith that she will make a significant impact in the medical field and fulfill her goal of finding a cure for tuberculosis, a disease that has taken so much from their family. Meanwhile, outside the serenity of the village, the world is in chaos, the drum of war is beating, and there's a threat of invasion of Greece by the Italian army. Due to the ongoing campaign for young men to rise to defend their country, Mandras is motivated by his sense of duty and patriotism. He feels a strong connection to his country and wants to defend it against the invading Italian army. He sees joining the army as a way to serve his country and make a difference in the war effort. Before he leaves for the war, he engages Pelagia. There are other motivations to join the army. These reasons are buried deep in his heart. When the news of the war breaks out, Mandras sees joining the army as a way to escape his monotonous life and make something of himself. He believes that by joining the army, he can become a hero and make his mark in the world. He also wishes to prove himself as a worthy son-in-law to Dr. Yanis. The very next day, Mandras marches off with his fellow young soldiers, ready to confront the Italian invaders head-on in a brutal war. Pelagia embraces him passionately, promising to write to him regularly while he's away fighting. Months have passed since Mandras went off to war with the Italians, and Pelagia is growing increasingly concerned about his well-being. She imagines all kinds of terrible scenarios and begins to worry that something may have happened to him. Despite her fears, Pelagia tries to remain optimistic, but the lack of communication and uncertainty surrounding Mandras' situation start to take a toll on her. She longs to hear from him and desperately hopes that he will return home safe and sound. She occupies her mind by constantly sewing and helping her father with his numerous patients. It's a way for her to stay busy and keep her thoughts from straying too far. But then, suddenly, her heart sinks as the thought crosses her mind. What if her man never makes it back? The fear grips her like a vice, and she can't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over her. She tries to push the thought away, to focus on the task at hand, but it's like a dark cloud hovering over her every move. Pelagia is left in the dark when Mandras fails to respond to her letters, and she soon discovers that he has been captured by the Germans. She fears for his safety and well-being, but her concerns only deepen when she finally receives a letter from him. Mandras reveals that he has been severely injured and cannot return home. Pelagia is heartbroken by this news, but she refuses to give up on their love and continues to write to him with unwavering devotion and support. Despite the numerous challenges they face, Pelagia remains resolute in her belief that she and Mandras will eventually be reunited. In the mid-year of 1941, Italy allied itself with Germany in a ruthless campaign to conquer the much weaker nation of Greece. In the midst of this chaos, a remote Greek island becomes the site of an Italian artillery garrison, established to maintain control over the occupied territory. The sound of gunfire echoes across the rugged landscape as the Italian soldiers go about their duties, patrolling the island and keeping a watchful eye on the local population. Despite the beauty of the surroundings, there is a palpable sense of tension and unease in the air as the islanders struggle to come to terms with their new reality under the occupying forces. The smiles on the faces of the villagers have turned to fear. Unhappiness is in the air. Things are hard and the stench of war, blood and death is overpowering. As Pelagia arrives home one day, she is startled to find a dirty-looking man sitting on the seat. His hair and beard are overgrown, and his clothes are torn and smelling. Initially alarmed, Pelagia moves closer and realizes that the disheveled figure is none other than her fiancé. She can hardly believe her eyes as she gazes at the man she loves, who has returned to her in such a pitiful state. As Mandras returns home from the war, he is wounded and exhausted. His mother and fiancé, Pelagia, treat his wounds and wash his body, listening intently to his bitter tales of the war. Pelagia gazes into Mandras' eyes, but she no longer sees the man she once knew. Instead, she senses a hollowness within him, and she can see the terror of war etched in his every expression. This man before her is Mandras, her fiancé, and yet she feels as though she does not truly know him anymore. The months spent fighting in the war have transformed him into a different person, and Pelagia realizes that their journey to rebuild their relationship will be a difficult one. Dr. Yanis receives orders to accommodate Captain Antonio Corelli, an Italian soldier who has come to take command of the occupying forces on the island. Corelli needs a place to stay, and the doctor agrees to house him. However, Pelagia's father is not happy about the situation, as it means that the soldier will be occupying his daughter's room. He initially refuses, but eventually relents, realizing that he cannot afford to create complications for himself and his daughter in these uncertain times. Although he is still not pleased about the situation, Pelagia's father begrudgingly provides accommodation for the captain. Corelli exudes a natural charm and charisma, earning the respect and admiration of his fellow soldiers and even the local villagers on the Greek island. Despite the tensions between the Italian occupying forces and the Greek population, Corelli seems to have a unique ability to win over the hearts and minds of the people. But Pelagia seems to dislike him. She's not a fan of his playful nature and constantly picks on him for his singing, partying, and drinking. Her attitude saddens Corelli, and he decides to leave their home, feeling intrusive in their space and unwelcome. Meanwhile, the soldiers are faced with hostile villagers who are wary of their presence. The tension is palpable, and the soldiers are aware that they need to find a way to break down the barriers between them and the locals. As they begin to interact with the villagers, the soldiers start to learn about their culture and way of life. They begin to see that the people they were sent to conquer are just like them, with families, friends, and a desire to be at peace. Slowly but surely, a bond starts to form between the soldiers and the locals, and the hostility starts to dissipate. To show their appreciation and to build goodwill, the soldiers come up with an idea to organize a party for the villagers. They bring out their instruments and encourage the locals to dance and sing along. At first, the villagers are hesitant, but as the music starts to play, they begin to let go of their reservations and embrace the moment. Both Pelagia and her dad were in attendance, and for a moment, everyone seemed to forget that there's an ongoing war. As time goes on, Mandras and Pelagia's once vibrant relationship begins to wither away. Mandras seems to have transformed into a different person, distant and unapproachable. Their playful moments are now replaced with silence and coldness, with Mandras easily getting angry and snapping at her. Pelagia tries to hold on and support him, but the constant strain and stress of the war have taken their toll on Mandras, leaving him with severe PTSD. Despite all this, Pelagia remains committed to helping Mandras heal, holding on to the hope that they can eventually overcome the challenges. On the Greek island of Cephalonia, the villagers are going about their daily routines when they suddenly notice a strange object floating in the water. They approach it and realize that it is an unexploded bomb that has washed up on the shore. Quickly, the villagers notify the authorities, and a team of soldiers and experts arrive to assess the situation. The bomb disposal experts carefully examine the bomb, and after realizing that it cannot be disarmed, they make the difficult decision to detonate it in the sea. Captain Corelli decides to lead the team for this task. As the villagers gather around to watch, the experts place the bomb in a specially designed container, covered with bags of sand, and lower it into the water. A safe distance away, Captain Corelli triggers the explosion, and a loud boom echoes across the island as the bomb is destroyed. However, during the explosion, Corelli sustains some injuries. He goes over to Pelagius to be treated. His recklessness angers her as she accuses him of putting himself in harm's way to show off to the villagers. In Pelagia's heart lies a secret she dare not reveal. She finds herself drawn to Captain Corelli in a way she can't explain. She loves the way he plays his mandolin, sings with such passion, and commands respect from the villagers. But to hide her true feelings, she picks on him and acts as if she can't stand him. She knows her affection for him could never be accepted, especially not in the midst of war and conflict. So she keeps her love for Corelli buried deep within her heart. Several days pass, and Pelagia walks through the forest by the river. She's lost in her own thoughts, gathering spices to make dinner. She hears the sound of a motorcycle approaching and turns around to see Captain Corelli riding towards her. She's surprised to see him there and watches as he parks his bike and steps towards her. Captain Corelli looks into Pelagia's eyes and she sees the deep affection he has for her. He confesses his love for her, telling her how he's been thinking about her every day since they met. Pelagia is taken aback by his words, but she can't deny the way she feels about him. Without hesitation, they kiss passionately, their feelings for each other becoming more intense by the second. After spending time together, they both left to their various homes. Dr. Yanis has been quietly observing his daughter Pelagia for some time now. Initially, he didn't pay much attention, but as he starts to notice her behavior more closely, it becomes impossible to ignore. He sees that Pelagia is falling in love with the Italian soldier, Captain Corelli. When Corelli was a guest in their home, he observed Pelagia's uncharacteristic rudeness towards him, and it was clear to Dr. Yanis what was going on in her heart. As her father and mentor, Dr. Yanis knows that he must speak to Pelagia about the true nature of love. He explains to her that love is not just a feeling but a commitment, and that it comes with a cost, a willingness to sacrifice and compromise to be with the person you love. Dr. Yanis reminds Pelagia that she is engaged to be married to Mandras, and he doesn't want her to become the center of village gossip. He encourages her to think deeply about her feelings for Captain Corelli and consider the long-term consequences of her actions. As he speaks to his daughter, his eyes scan her face, watching for any hint of a reaction. His words trail off as he notices her cheeks slowly turning crimson. A pang of guilt hits him as he realizes he may be causing her embarrassment, but he knows he can't back down now. He has to say what needs to be said, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. He takes a deep breath and continues, hoping his daughter will understand his intentions. Pelagia listens to her father's wise words, but she's torn between her love for Mandras and the growing affection she feels for Captain Corelli. Nevertheless, she knows that her father is right, and she must be careful not to hurt anyone in the process of following her heart. All seems normal for a while until tensions rise between the occupying German forces and the Italian soldiers stationed on the idyllic Greek island. The situation becomes increasingly volatile. With each passing day, the Germans become more aggressive and assertive, demanding that the Italians give up their arms and abandon their posts. It was a rumor until it is no longer one, which came as a surprise to the Italian soldiers, especially Captain Corelli. Tensions rise as the leader of the Greek resistance demands that the Italian soldiers on the island surrender their weapons and leave immediately. The demand comes as a shock to Captain Corelli and his men, who have grown to love the island and its people. Despite the threat of violence, Captain Corelli refuses to comply with the resistance leader's demand, insisting that he and his men have orders to stay and protect the island. As Mandras returns from the war against the Italians, his mind consumes him with a sense of duty to his country. Pelagia, his fiancée, tries to get his attention, but his heart and mind are fixed on his homeland. Mandras is called once again to take up arms and defend Greece. He joins the resistance fighters and begins his training for guerrilla warfare. He learns the art of setting traps, ambushing enemy soldiers, and moving stealthily through the forest. Mandras fights with whatever weapons he can find, driven by his personal hatred for the Germans and the atrocities he has witnessed. However, the resistance fighters face a major challenge, which is the lack of weapons. In a desperate attempt to arm themselves, Mandras approaches Captain Corelli and demands that he hands over his weapon as the Italians are leaving Greece. Captain Corelli is torn between his duty to his country and his growing respect for Mandras and the resistance group. Instead of submitting just ammunition, he has to make a fast decision. He has always been a loyal soldier, following orders without question. But now, as he watches the Germans draw closer, he knows that he cannot simply stand by and watch. Despite his allegiance to Italy, Corelli has come to love this island with its sun-kissed beaches and vibrant people. He has fallen deeply for a local woman, and his heart is torn between his duty to his country and his growing affection for this place and its people. Despite the dangers and risks, Corelli makes a decision that will change the course of his life. He chooses to join the people of Cephalonia in their fight against the Germans, realizing that his duty is not just to his country, but to the people who have become his friends and allies. As the German invasion of Cephalonia intensifies, Captain Corelli and his men fight tirelessly to defend their island. But despite their bravery, they are ultimately outmatched by the German forces, who are better equipped and more numerous. One day, Corelli and his men find themselves surrounded by German soldiers in the rugged hills of Cephalonia. With no hope of escape, they prepare to make a last stand against the enemy. As the Germans close in, Corelli's friend and fellow soldier, Carlo, realizes that Corelli is in the direct line of fire. Without hesitation, Carlo positions himself in front of Corelli, shielding him from the German bullets with his own body. Despite Carlo's sacrifice, the Germans continue to fire, and Carlo is eventually shot and killed. Corelli is devastated by the loss of his friend, but he manages to survive the attack thanks to Carlo's selflessness and heroism. Corelli is being rushed to Dr. Yanis' house, even with Carlo's acting as his body shield against the German bullet. Despite Carlo's valiant efforts, Corelli is grievously wounded and loses an immense amount of blood. Dr. Yanis and Pelagia work tirelessly, their hands moving with practiced urgency as they strive to save Corelli's life. Despite the limited medical supplies available, they refuse to give up hope, knowing that every passing moment is crucial in their fight to keep Corelli alive. The room is filled with tension and fear as the two medical professionals work with unrelenting determination. They know that the stakes are high and the odds are stacked against them, but they refuse to give up hope. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of tireless effort, Corelli stabilizes. Dr. Yanis and Pelagia share a look of relief and joy as they realize that their hard work has paid off. The air is thick with the sound of gunfire as both sides clash in a desperate struggle for victory. Mandras and his comrades fight with every ounce of strength they possess, but they quickly realize that they are vastly outnumbered. With each passing moment, the resistance group members fall one by one, their bodies punctured by bullets from the German guns. The battle rages on, but it soon becomes clear that the Germans have the upper hand. After the fighting ends, the Germans move through the streets, searching relentlessly for any remaining resistance group members or Italian soldiers. Those found are executed on the spot, their bodies left to lie in the streets as a warning to others. Despite the odds, Mandras and Captain Corelli are among the lucky few to survive the deadly onslaught. They managed to evade the German soldiers, staying hidden from their sight and avoiding detection. Corelli was hiding in Pelagia's house while Mandras was at his mom's. In a quiet room, Pelagia stands before Mandras, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. She has fallen out of love with him, and she knows that the right thing to do is to return the ring that once symbolized their love. Mandras sits nearby, holding a stack of letters that Pelagia wrote to him while he was away at war. As she approaches him, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out the ring, offering it to him with a solemn expression. Mandras takes the ring, his face etched with sadness and regret. He confesses that he was once deeply in love with Pelagia, but the horrors of war have changed him. He is no longer the same man that he once was, and his heart is filled with bitterness towards those who caused the war. That same night, Captain Corelli is smuggled out of the island of Cephalonia in a small boat, with Pelagia watching from the shore. Him being alive is a miracle. The longer he stays, the riskier it is for him getting caught. As he makes his way to the shore, Captain Corelli turns back to look at Pelagia, his eyes filled with sadness and longing. He takes her hand in his, holding it tightly for a moment before turning and boarding the small boat. He promises to come back for her. Pelagia watches as the boat disappears into the darkness, her heart heavy with sorrow and regret. She knows that their love is doomed from the start, but that doesn't make it any easier to say goodbye. As the boat sails further and further away, Pelagia stands on the shore, watching until it disappears from sight. She knows that her life will never be the same again. But she also knows that she will never forget the love that she shares with Captain Corelli. Many years later, time has flown by, and so much has unfolded in the lives of the people in this small Greek village. Pelagia, once a young woman with big dreams, is now a successful doctor who runs her own clinic. The villagers hold her in high regard, grateful for her kindness and expertise. But Pelagia's story doesn't end there. She and her father have taken in a little girl named Lemoni, who lost her parents at the hands of German soldiers during the war. It's been a challenging road for all of them, but they've become a family. The war has finally come to an end, and Hitler's reign of terror is over. The German troops are withdrawing from Greece as the villagers begin to rebuild their shattered lives. It's a slow process, but they're making progress. Just as they're starting to feel hopeful again, disaster strikes. An earthquake shakes the island, and it's a miracle that Pelagia, her father, and Lemoni survive. They pick up the pieces of their lives, determined to move forward. Through all of this, Pelagia never hears from Captain Corelli. No letters, no words. It's a hard pill to swallow, but she tries to focus on her work and the people who need her. Her father has retired, but Pelagia is more committed than ever to her patients and her community. On that day, the sun sets over the beautiful Greek island of Cephalonia as Pelagia stands on the beach, staring out at the sea. It has been years since she last saw Captain Corelli, the man she thought she lost forever. But suddenly, the sound of a familiar melody reaches her ears. Pelagia turns, and there he is, Captain Corelli, playing his mandolin. Overwhelmed with emotion, Pelagia runs towards him. They embrace, and as they hold each other, Captain Corelli tells her that he's returned because he loves her. He explains that he didn't write to her after hearing she has a child and that made him think she is married. But he's happy she isn't married. He is now a famous mandolin singer and he wants to share this journey with her. As they talk, the truth comes out. They've both been in love with each other all along. Captain Corelli takes her hand and leads her to a waiting motorcycle. Together, they drive off into the sunset. This is the beginning of the happily ever after.